Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking and tackling Multiplot's Report Builder. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin. I am one of the resident webinar hosts here at Softree, and with me is our training manager, Matthew Dickey. So today, we're going to try and go for 30 minutes. It's just a bit of a lofty goal given our webinar track record of being on time. But today's webinar is going to be done in version 11. So if you hadn't heard it already, we just recently released a new version. V11 dropped last month. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, we did include the link. But version 11 includes a couple really exciting features for multiplot. And one of those we're going to be sure to cover today, which is the ability to control and have multiple alignments included inside of your multiplot. So this is where we're going to be able to use different alignments and attach them to different chapters. We're also going to be introducing to you our new multiplot rich text box, which if you saw our sort of title slide sitting there, it gives you the ability to control the formatting and font through the import of rich text, which can be really useful if you're looking to achieve some very specific sort of layout objectives with different texts and format types. So if you want to learn a little bit more about V11, check out the link. Otherwise, let's talk a little bit more about multiplot. So for those of you not familiar, what is multiplot? It is essentially our paper space. It is our paper output product or window within RoadEng's. And multiplot itself doesn't necessarily need to be paper. That's why I put it in quotes. It certainly can be, set up like you're going to print it, but you can also save it out as DWG. The multiplots themselves are highly customizable, whether we're looking at what's on a page, the number of different page types included. As well, it is connected directly to your design. So if you were to make a change, I've got the 3D window here in this screenshot. So if you were to make a change to that 3D design, the impact of those changes is immediately reflected through into our paper output in multiplot. So as I mentioned, it can be a collection of different page types. And before we go and actually get into looking at multiplot, I think it's just really important to reinforce sort of the unique organizational structure that multiplot has. So multiplot, and I should say we're talking about location multiplot, not terrain multiplot. So location multiplot has sort of like a container that contains all the content inside of it. And we refer to that as our book. And so this is just a little over here on the left-hand side, just a little preview of that view panel within multiplot. So at the highest level, we call it our book. From within a book, you can have multiple different chapters, and each chapter represents its own page type. These can be things like a title page, a plan profile chapter, maybe a cross-section chapter, as well as you can use more additional chapters that have different page ranges or station ranges attached to them if you want to change the layout. So you can have lots of different chapters inside a book, and each chapter represents its own page type. And then the chapters each then contain pages, and the number of pages is controlled by the pagination settings. And we'll take a fair bit of time today to talk about what pagination settings are, but they're essentially a combination of your road or corridor length, the scale, and then the method of pagination that you've selected. These different elements, the book, as well as the chapter, can actually be saved as a layout file. And these layout files can then be used and applied to different projects. So we've got the book layout file referred to as a BLT, and the chapter layout file is a CLT. So today's plan really is to go and take a look at in-depth how multiplot works. And we're actually going to start with a completed design. So if you're interested to see how we got to that started, the finished design part, we are picking up from our last webinar. So if you joined us a couple weeks back, we covered an introduction to rural road design. The end point for that webinar is going to essentially be the starting point for today's webinar. We'll be sure to include a link to that video in our follow-up email. But yes, we're going to pick up at the end of our last webinar, cover how an introduction to how multiplot works. We'll take a look at that organizational structure I just introduced you to. We'll talk a little bit more about controlling content, pagination, configuring and customizing your pages, working with that great new version 11 feature, which is multiple alignments in the same book, and then how you can share and reuse these layouts. And with that very brief introduction with only 30 minutes on the clock, I am going to pass it now over to Matt. We're going to get into the software, take a look at multiplot. And if you have any questions as we go through this webinar, please do open up that question section of your GoToWebinar panel, type them in, and we'll be happy to address them at the end. Matt, to you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for the intro. Yeah, and as promised, we'll dive right in. And as Aaron stated, we're picking up more or less where we left off with our last English webinar. And that is that we've got two designs modeled and well, ready to put together some formatted documents. So for this, we'll switch over to our multiplot editor. And there's a couple ways to get there. One would be to go up to View and New Window, Multiplot, or we can just hit this little icon down here. And we've got this blank document. We've got pages, we've got a chapter, we've got a book, but it's a lot easier to see if we start out with something that's largely already set up. So I'm going to just switch over to, and we'll set our page size as one we'd like. We'll open up our book layout. And we can see here that concept of having pages inside chapters, inside of a workbook is a little easier to wrap our head around. So that's, I guess, one of the first key concepts. Another key concept is that we have chapters that largely control the format of the pages within them. So here, if I click on my cross-section chapter, well, all the pages within this have cross-sections driving the core functionality of the pages. Now, with that, another kind of core function is the idea that we've got these pagination settings that control how much of a road or what road is driving the chapter behavior. So for that, I'll come in here, I'll click that, and we can see, well, we've got our station range selected from ... to ... So that's our whole road. And our sections that we have selected are driving how much appears on each page. And then the alignment that's being displayed is auto, so our currently selected alignment up here. So that is, I guess, a few really foundational concepts that we'll talk about more. Of course, we're not just going to dissect and talk about a document that's already been set up. We're going to kind of roll it back and start entirely from scratch, and then we're going to jump ahead to using something that's somewhat formatted the way we like and modifying it to be what we'd like. And of course, once we get something set up, we'll save that out. So like we did here, we've got that really nice, easy to use book layout template or chapter layout template that we can use on our next project. We don't have to do all the nitty-gritty formatting. So I'm going to just delete a few of these chapters. We're going to add a blank chapter in, and I'm going to start there. So if we were to actually start from scratch and not have a book layout or a chapter layout that we'd like to use, well, we could. And usually it would be something that we'd only have to do once. Once we did it once and got our document set up the way we'd like, we'd save it, and it would just be a matter of bringing in the formatting that we'd like. Now, if we're starting out, first thing that we want to do is set our page size. So this will be the page size for the book. I'm going to run with an ANSI size. Now, if we wanted to run with a tabloid or letter, we absolutely could. And then if we had something that wasn't a common standard page size, we could set it up with our custom size here. But we'll run with D. And then if we wanted to start out by making this our plan over profile, well, we can rename our chapter. And we can bring in our individual views. So I've got my multiplot ribbon set. I'm going to go in here, and if I want my plan over profile, well, I'm probably going to bring in my plan view. We'll position that how we'd like. And I'm going to bring in my profile view. We'll position that how we'd like. And one thing that we'll notice very quickly if we don't do it is it might be tedious to get these lined up if we're just freehanding it. So I'm going to set a grid, and we're going to have snap to grid functionality. We can choose whether we're working with imperial units or metric units for that grid. So independent of your project settings, whether you're metric or not, we can pull this around, and now it's a lot easier to get that to share a common line. Now, with that, if we're doing a plan over profile, one thing that is really common here is that we're going to want to have our scales set to be the same across our plan view and then the horizontal portion of our profile. And here I'm going to just kind of use this as an opportunity to mess things up right from the get-go. And we can see, well, we've only got a portion of our road. And to avoid some confusion, I'm going to make it so we can't see that other alignment. So I'm in my Project Explorer panel. I'm going to turn off that display and background for alignment 2. So right now, we can see the end portion, but our page is only showing one page. That is our pagination options. So here, this pagination setting for this chapter isn't set to follow our plan or profile width. It's set to just show a fixed width. So we're going to change this to show a 10% overlap. And now that is following page 1, page 2, and page 3 is just capturing that little bit of road at the end. Now, continuing along with if we were building out this from scratch chapter, well, again, I'm going to do something wrong right from the get-go to make it a little easier to see. And that is, well, I'm going to add in my title block. I'm going to say we're going to change our font just the way you expect it to behave. We'll make this centered and centered. And the big thing here that we'll notice is it's only going to appear on one page, and that is because we've got our page 3 selected rather than making the edits at the chapter level. So we'll position that, move this around. But if we look at page 2, well, we don't get that. If we look at page 1, we don't get that. If we had have added it with the chapter selected, well, then it would appear on everything. So chapter selected when we copied or cut and pasted that in. So now on page 1, it's there. Page 2, it's there. Page 3, it's there. So we've got chapter edits and we've got page edits. Now let's, rather than building out this document entirely from scratch, let's fast forward a little bit. And going back to one of those key concepts is that we can use them as templates. Those templates can be either documents that you've set up and saved locally, a colleague has set up and given to you, or it could be something that we've set up, put on our web library, and you can bring that in and you can use that as a jumping off point for formatting your own documents. So again, page size is going to matter here. So if we have our size D sheets, when we click Access Web Library, we've got access to a bunch of size D pre-formatted chapters. So I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to delete this other one that was just me clicking around. And we've got something a little busier, a little further along. And let's modify this and get it set up to match what we'd like. With that, another kind of key concept that I'm going to introduce here is there's going to be kind of template level formatting where we're setting this document up to be easy to use in the future. And then there's going to be some design level edits that we may tweak when we use a template later for individual designs. So we're going to start with the kind of template level setups where we're changing formatting and default behavior.
And Matt, while you get that ready, just a quick question from the chat here, which is about the blue dots on the page. So just if they're being printed or if that's just a visual aid.
That's a great question. They are not being printed. Those are a visual aid to help me see where the grid is that I have set. So when I'm moving things around, all these text box and sub views are snapping to them. So yeah, they don't have to be printed. They don't have to be displayed either. And it's personal preference whether you display them or not. I like to see them, but we can, turn that show grid off and we can still have that snapping function without the grid being displayed. All right, so I'll continue along here. The first thing that I'm going to, I guess, draw attention to is we've got a data table down here that's saying not available. So that is this template that I brought in from the eLibrary. It has two data tables included in it. So there's an earthwork summary and then there's a culvert summary. Now my design file that I have only has one data table in it. So these data tables in the multiplot editor can be independent and are independent, but one thing to be aware of is you need at least as many data tables in your design as you plan to show in your multiplot. So with that, I don't have a data table, but if I add one into my file, so I'll just create a new window. It's showing me volume information, but the important thing is that I've got a data table 2 now, and that is populated. And we could change it around and customize it however we'd like for controlling different report points and different columns. So we've got the data table. Let's, I guess we've already done it. We'll just do it again to talk about it in this context. I want my scale zoomed in a little bit more. So I'm going to change this to be 1 to 1,000 in my plan view. I'm going to make the same change in my profile. And here, personally, I like to work with an exaggerated scale. So I'm going to keep an exaggerated scale, but I am going to change how much that's exaggerated. So a little trick, usually you'll want your plan and profile to be the same horizontal scale. Now this stuff down here, if we click our profile window, we can see all this stuff is part of that profile or the longitudinal section. So I'm going to rejig this and I'm going to do it entirely from scratch just to, I guess, make it a little easier to digest rather than jumping partway through. So all of these items that come below the profile itself are referred to as sub-windows. So I'm going to remove those to start just to talk about. And we can add in what we'd like. So I'm going to say, well, I want my sub-windows themselves to take up 150 millimeters of my page space. And I want to see my mass haul to start. So we've got our mass haul underneath there. Great. Now I also want to see some custom labels. And this is something that you can show all sorts of different information in it, but I'll just add a few. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, well, let's add a custom label. I'll shift that one up. I'll add another custom label. And well, while we're in here, save going in and out, I'm going to add in my horizontal curves and vertical curves. So these are just a graphic. So these custom labels, I'll configure what I want to see there. So I'll highlight that, I'll click options, and I'll say, well, this one's going to show me my ground elevation. Now I'm going to, other than just giving it a description, I'm going to want to tell it what actual attribute that equates to. So we can see we've got a bunch of system-defined attributes. So ground elevation's in my ground layers folder. I'm going to say, well, I want to see that every 20 meters. So I'm going to set the report points. And if I wanted to change that spacing, we could. We'll set that up. And I'll go in here and I'm going to make something. Oh, actually, I forgot. I want to do one more thing here. And I'm going to change the space that this takes up. So I'm going to set that to be 10 mils. I'll do something similar for the next. Only this one is going to be centerline elevation. This will be in my L line. We'll set our report points to be 20 meters. And I think we're good. So now we've got that kind of banding formatting applied underneath our road. And then it's kind of, again, just another little trick that's nice to be aware of. If we want to set these up to have a nice, neat line following along here, well, we don't have to just display the labels. We could change it up and we could say, well, let's add in a text rectangle. So we could say ground elevation. We don't want it to be transparent. We'll make it center. We've got our bounding rectangle on there. And and we'll copy that. We'll click paste. We'll move that down and so on and so forth. So we can set that up here the way we'd like, and we could extend that right down so we had the same formatting for our horizontal curves, our vertical curves, etc. Now these subviews, one thing that's another nice trick to be aware of is the fact that we can lock them. So if we get them positioned the way we'd like and we don't want to accidentally bump something, we can click lock position, and now we can come in here and we can't resize that or accidentally nudge the text box over. Now if we wanted to go and move something, we could, but we'd want to say, well, let's turn on edit locked items, and then we can. So when we have items locked and edit locked items is turned off, we can see that there's a little icon showing up in all those different sub windows to tell you that something's locked and you won't be able to fully edit it. And then another thing that comes up occasionally is, well, if we want to add in a north arrow, well, we could use the default north arrow here. Now, with that, I've added it in, and mine is appearing underneath that. So I don't want that to have to get moved. So I'm going to add in my own custom north arrow. And with that, we can add it in from a terrain file. I'll just click browse here. And I've got one stored in here. We'll go north arrow 1. So we can see that north arrow. I'm going to double click this. Well, I actually like this to rotate with my plan view. So now that's going to match up there. We can resize this sub window however we'd like and put it wherever we'd like that way. And this is something that we can do on the individual page level as well if we have something that wiggles around that we'd like to not just have that north arrow in a single position. Next, we're going to add in our cross-section chapter. Oh, and I guess before we do, if I wanted to use this as a template, well, this would be something that I would probably be content with having it set up at a template level. Other things that I may consider before saving it out as a template are my default label positions all the way I'd like. So we can, of course, add labels in and format them. So I'm going to just, rather than adding additional labels in, I'm going to make it so my BC and EC labels are on the other side of the leader. So we can just double click that sub view, come in here and say, well, I want to change my BC and EC position. Since this is done at the view level, it will be applied as a default. And we've flipped those to the other side of the leader. A little easier to read. And so if that's the template I'd like, we can save it and save chapter. I'm going to quickly throw in a cross-section view. So multiplot, we are going to bring in a new chapter. We'll go with that one there. So we've got this, very similar for how everything behaves. We've got the paginations driving what gets shown. Only here we've got our cross sections are spaced out more than I'd like. So I'm going to change the class of report point that we have there. So we're going to highlight the sub view. I'm going to go 2 by 2. And point types, we don't want just every 100 meters. We're going to set it to be auto interval, 20 meters. And we're also going to include our culvert insertion points. So there we are. We can follow along our road and see what's getting built. Now we've got this text at the bottom. That's a status. We could change that to show banding. So I'm going to turn off my status. I'm going to turn banding on. And let's add in subgrade point codes. I want to see my point codes for my subgrade material. And horizontal offset for those codes. We'll add that in. We'll hit OK. We'll hit OK. And now we can see where, well, the ditch inside point code lands 9.6 from center line, so on and so forth. So really easy to visualize what we have going on. We can duplicate the chapter, set it up to be similar, but show something different if we want to. So let's change this. We'll go in here, we'll add our status fields, and we're going to set this up just to show some culvert information. So let's do culvert diameter, culvert length, inlet X, Y, and Z, outlet X, Y, and Z. And we're going to change this to just show anywhere that we've added a pipe. And we'll do that there. Oh. And let's turn off that grid. So we've got that, and of course we can change the scale here if we'd like as well. And those status fields are being populated down here. So really easy to format that. Yeah, and if it was the way we'd like, we could just hit save as for our chapter. And if we were happy with this whole document, we could save the book layout as our document. Now I'm going to add in my other alignment here. So I'm going to go back up here. And this was just more of a mention. I'm going to keep it to the core functionality here. So I'm going to add in a new rectangle. Now I'm going to make this populated off some system defined parameters. So I want the name here to be my horizontal alignment. We'll make it centered. We're just going to throw that over here. And we're going to turn off that bounding rectangle. So I'm just doing this so I can keep track of what's what here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to also put that somewhere in my document here. Actually, I'm going to grab that and we're going to turn that snapping on, and we're going to just set that up. So all I'm doing there is I'm just adding an identifier for the actual alignment that it's driving. And now I'm going to, change my pagination settings. So instead of just being whatever's my current alignment, I'm going to set it to be associated with horizontal, or horizontal alignment named alternative 1. We'll do the same up here. So this is associated with a specific alignment now. Now we can duplicate that. We'll have it for our other alignment here. And we'll duplicate this one. We'll do the same thing, have it show the geometry associated with our other alignment there. And away we go. Yeah, so now we've got multiple horizontal alignments in the same multiplot. And let's add in a quick notes page. So we're just going to add in a new blank. We're going to shift this up. And so again, rather than setting this all up from scratch, I'm doing a cheat. I'm going to copy that title block information. I'll click paste. We've got that in there. And I can add in my notes. Now for this, I'm not going to type everything out. And to save having to format and make things look nice, I'm going to use a rich text paste text box. So we've got that. And we're going to pretend that I've got something more interesting here. But here in my Word document, I've got a table. I've got some text with the bold formatting. I can just copy that, hit paste, and now all that formatting is preserved when we bring it over. So that's our rich text paste, and we can run with that. And we could add a title page if we'd like, but the concepts are going to be the same throughout. Once we're ready to actually finalize what we're working with, well, we can file, print. If we want to write to PDF, we can choose whatever PDF driver we'd like, print to paper, or we can hit File, Save As, and export that document as, where is it? An Avenza file. So we can zip that together, and if we do that, the plans of our design are going to be georeferenced. So if we use the Avenza app, we can see where we're at as we go to the field. And then of course, it's not necessarily multiplot related, but if we want to export this for construction staking, we can file, save as, and export it to any number of digital formats, XML, DXF, text, etc. So with that, that is what I was hoping to cover. And yeah, open it up for a few questions. And of course I went over.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And of course, we went over. I don't think we've ever been on time for a webinar ever, which hopefully our audience is used to. So a couple questions here. The first one, just going back to the north arrow that you imported. The user would like to know, where did you get the north arrow file from?
All right. So that one is when you install, there's some public documents that get written into a Softtree folder. Yeah, if you come in here, I've got samples and library, and that lives in there. You're not stuck just using the files that we write. You can create your own. All it is a train file, and we've got it just set to orient to the same orientation as our plan view and the design. Yeah, and we've got a knowledge page article as well on that. So if you Google Softtree North Arrow, there'll be a how-to and tell you exactly where those files are at as well, other than me just showing it here.
Excellent. Okay, so the next two questions are kind of in the same space. So I'll just share both of them and we can tackle it together. So the first question is, how do I control my page numbering? For example, if I've got other content, how do I skip that page number so I can insert it? And then the second question related to this is, can you make that alternate alignment to start as page 1?
Yep. Yeah, I think both go hand in hand here. It's done at the chapter level. So if we go in here, we've got our alternate alignment here. Number of pages to skip before, and yeah, let's see here. Oh, I guess can we put a negative number in there? Yeah, so we could split it up into multiple documents, or we could switch which one comes first here for that. But if we want to just have a gap, we can tell it to skip pages. So if we want to add a gap at the start, number of pages to skip before, we'll throw that in. And now instead of starting at page 1, that starts at sheet 5. So that is hopefully answers the question. And yeah, for the splitting up which one starts first, we could switch around. So that could be page 1, and yeah, or we could do it as separate documents, kind of the way that we would handle it prior to version 11.
Awesome. Let's tackle one more because we're so over time, which is, can we import a DWG template into multiplot?
So you can import DWGs. Now the I guess problem being that the way our documents work are quite a bit different than like a title block in Paperspace. So it won't match the same functionality, but short answer is yes, you can import DWGs. The more nuanced answer is you probably won't want to. It'll just be a matter of setting your document up once, and then you get all the smarts and functionality of working with a multiplot and everything kind of working seamlessly, hooked up to the model behavior. I just forgot about one thing that I meant to mention that comes up fairly often. If yeah, don't mind me going over here. One thing that does come up reasonably frequently is changing your start station. So my alignment 2 has a start station that is not 0, which I'd like. So we can just make it my current alignment, go into options, and change that start station to however we like. And another thing that I think I missed on covering is orientation. So right now my scroll is set to auto. If I want to move this around independently of that auto scroll, so I've got my plan view, rotation is set to 54 to just line up with my road nicely. I could, well, turn auto off and manually set those numbers, or I can click the sub view and I can hold in Shift on my keyboard and use the arrow keys to move that up and down and over, or I can use Control to rotate with my arrow keys. So yeah, 2 items that I meant to cover and totally missed. So
Awesome. Okay, guys. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for joining us for a half-hour-ish webinar today. Last couple questions in the chat. We'll tackle those over email. And with that, we want to wish you guys all a really, awesome rest of your day. If you have any questions about multiplot that you didn't get time to type into the chat, feel free to email them to us, support.team@softry.com. And we look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming webinars. We've got our next one 2 weeks from today. We're going to be doing widenings and overlays. So a webinar topic we have not covered in depth a lot lately. Thank you guys all for coming to today's webinar.